Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Hello and welcome to another episode of Living the Dream with Curveball. I am your host, Curveball, and today I am joined by Kevin Burton. He is a blind journalist, a retired beat baseball coach, as well as a player, and he now does freelance journaling, has his own blog. We're going to be talking about the life of Kevin Burton today. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Why don't you start off by telling everybody maybe a little bit about yourself, maybe where you're from, or anything that you might want the audience to know before we kick it off?
Well, I'm visually impaired, of course, and I am partially sighted. So some of the things I mentioned, that is helpful to know that. Um, so I've been have same level of vision all my life, and you know, um, living the dream. That's probably a good description for much of my life. I've been very, very blessed. I have not always been able to see a blessing and count it for what it was, because I've had some struggles, as most people have. But the vision impairment has, I mean, I really wouldn't wish that on anybody, but for having had that, it's given me some actually advantages and some things that I really worked out to my favor. So I'll just touch on a few things, and you can prompt me if we need to move forward. But I didn't. My parents weren't real good. In fact, they weren't very good at all in regard to sitting me down and saying, "Okay, you have a visual impairment, and here's what it is, and here's what it means." That would have been helpful to me, but I didn't get that. So, as a quick aside, parents, if this is your road that you're traveling with a child, have that talk. But but I, at the age of 9, I went to the Ohio State School for the Blind in Columbus, and that I certainly didn't know it at the time, but that was the best thing that ever happened to me as a young boy. I got to know a lot of people with my same problems, visual problems. I got to positions of leadership that I maybe wouldn't have gotten into at regular school, such as a wrestling captain and student council and things such as that. But now looking back, these are my lifelong friends, and really, if you see us interacting out and about in the big wide world, we react to each other and act around each other more like siblings than friends, because that's what we were really growing up at a residential school there in Columbus. And I guess there were about close to 200 students when I was there, so it was a real blessing. And of course, we called it back in the day the Braille jail. So we didn't have any knowledge. We really had it well. So college was another challenge. I had gone to public school for part of my upper high school for half a year and as a junior, and for half a day each day as a senior. So that was good in learning to relate in the sighted world, because that's the one major disadvantage to a school for the blind. It's closed off from the regular larger society, and you kind of get used to that, and that's not how the world is. So you that's the one thing you need to do, is to keep, if you have a child of that age, the schools for the blind are good, but you have to make sure that children are socialized and exposed to, all kinds of people, sighted people as well as blind people. So I went to, I said I went to high school in mostly in Ohio, and when I came to went to college up in Kansas, about an hour north of where I am now at McPherson College. So as a senior in high school, a couple of friends and I started a little newspaper. We called it the Western Sky, and so that was fun. It was it was regarded as legitimate by the teachers. So if I was working on a story, then I could get out of class to go do an interview or go look up something or whatever. So they gave it at least that much respect. It wasn't a school sponsored thing. It was something that we started. And so with that little bit of journalism, I showed up on campus to the school's newspaper at the McPherson College when I got there. And I got a really good grounding of, writing at that time. Also, they had a television station, and I did a little bit of television announcing basketball on TV. So that is the main area where my journalism career started, and I've always been somebody very interested in words and language, and so that's kind of where it started. And I didn't stay. I did do journalism professionally. Didn't stay in it always as a for work, but I've kind of circled around back to it. So that's been one of the major themes in my life.
Well, before we get into that, let me just ask, why do you feel that your parents did not sit you down and have that talk, as you call it? Do you think it was because they didn't want to scare you, or they just didn't know any better? Because a lot of parents don't have any idea about blindness or how it works. They just know that they have a blind child or a visually impaired child, whichever word people want to use.
Well, I don't know if people would pick up on this, but I mentioned that I went mostly to high school in Ohio and college in Kansas, and that's largely because they broke up. So they were having their own relationship problems. So I guess that was part of it. But I really don't know why they wouldn't have done that. That's a very good question. I don't know. My dad, he I don't think he had the right reasons for having children in the first place, but he, it's not something, and you can tell because I'm stumbling around the topic. It's not something I've really thought about a lot, because I did get to go to the blind school up in Columbus. So I don't think they knew much of anything about blindness. So they just didn't have it in them, I guess.
Yeah, I understand that. So let's talk about your journalism career. What was it like to be a blind journalist, and what were some of the interesting things that you got to do, and the things that you had to do to make it work for you? Because, in journalism, sometimes you have to travel, you might have to go do a story, go do an interview. How did you work all that out?
Well, the first thing I found out was very few editors and publishers of these newspapers thought a visually impaired person could do the news full time. So I discovered this the summer after I graduated, and I put out resumes all over the place. And there's a magazine called Editor and Publisher, and it's about the journalism industry, print journalism industry. And in the back are the jobs that are open. And so I used to obviously get that and apply for the ones in places where I wanted to go or thought I could compete for the job. So that's the first thing about journalism. It was very hard to get in because there are some legitimate questions that a paper would and should ask. How are you going to get around? How are you going to get to this? So the better newspapers at least looked at it, and it helped me figure it out. And the ones who really had no imagination, they just kind of didn't even try. So that the first thing to mention is the difficulty of even getting into the field. And then my first job, after so much struggle trying to find a job, I mentioned this newspaper. I said, well, I can see some jobs here in some far off places like Alaska. So I said to myself, I bet nobody really wants to go to Alaska. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply for those jobs, and I'm going to be competing against fewer people, and maybe I can get in that way. And that is how it happened. So this is just an example of what a blind person sometimes, many times, has to do. Think outside the box. In my case, think way outside the box. There were two jobs I remember. One was at a newspaper, a twice weekly newspaper called The Frontiersman. It's in Wasilla, Alaska. And the other paper I applied to was the Nome Nugget, Nome Nugget. Nome is that city way out there on the Aleutian Islands, going toward Russia, way out there. One of the very, very coldest places in Alaska. And so, thank God it was the frontiersman that called me and offered me a job. That was about an hour north of Anchorage. So it's cold, but it's really consistently not any colder than, say, Minnesota, or it's nothing that you can't live with. So when I got there, my first editor had a disability himself. He had a polio as a younger person, and he had a leg that wasn't 100% functional. So he gave me a chance, and so once I got into the job, I was really motivated to succeed, to prove for myself and for, I don't know, I kind of still think this way. I want to succeed to prove that blind people can do whatever, X, Y, Z. So I have to this day, I have a handheld magnifiers that I use to read stuff up close. I have a monocular that I use if I'm in a room and somebody's putting vote totals, local election night, vote totals up on a board. I use the monocular to see across the room to do that. So you're going to find a way. If you love something, if you're really motivated, you're going to find a way. So I had some doubters. In fact, my first editor said that you really need to come through, because there's some people that are kind of doubting this. So, and I did. I ended up with a fistful of awards there. One year I was the best sports columnist in the whole state of Alaska. So that's kind of how it got started, and I went on from there. I ended up doing it was about 7 years in total, 7.5 years, working in small papers and magazines in Kansas, Alaska, Ohio, Washington, and Iowa. Those are the places I worked. The only daily I worked at was in Iowa, in a town called Muscatine, Mississippi River town called Muscatine. So it was a joy to fulfill my life streams. Got to work with words and language, got to entertain, got to inform. I used to call myself, somewhat pretentiously perhaps, an unblinking champion of the truth. I was out there trying to cut through, as they say in journalism, trying to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. So that's what it was. And I mentioned briefly in college, I did some television. I did a very little bit of radio as well, but mostly I've enjoyed the print journalism, and getting to fulfill that dream.
Well, speaking of words and language, you really did get to work with words and languages, even other languages. Talk about your time in Mexico and how you got that job and how that came about and what that was even like. Because going to Alaska is one thing, that's still in America, but you went to a completely different country to get a job.
Well, yeah, I actually told these out of sequence because it was my frustration at not getting a newspaper job that made me even think about going to Mexico. So the Mexico idea came from there were three college friends of mine who said, "Hey, let's go down to Mexico for a couple weeks." And I said, "Well, I'm up for such and such a job. If I get it, I'm obviously going to that. If I don't get it, I'll go down to Mexico." Well, I didn't get it. And so I went down to Mexico with these guys. We drove. It was one of my songs that I wrote is called Four-Part Mexican Band, and that stems from that time. And we crossed at Laredo, and to we went down the middle of the country to Mexico City, and then turned to the Atlantic and drove back up the Atlantic coast. And it was just a lot of fun. I forgot to not drink the water. I remember that the first. We've driven into Mexico and we're a few miles in, and we sit at this restaurant, and they obviously they bring you water. Everybody brings you water, so I forgot where I was, and I'm just sipping this water, and my so-called friends are just looking at me, grinning. But I think that whole thing may be overblown because I never got sick from that. But anyway, after I had fun on this 2-week trip, so I got more and more frustrated when I got back up to the States not getting this job. I said, well, I'm going to give it a little bit more time, and then I'm going to see about going to Mexico. And I'm either going to be a tour guide or I'm going to teach English. And those were the things that Americans could do pretty easily. So I ended up going to Mexico. I remember the day before I left, got on the plane to go to Mexico, my mom said to me, "Did you ever think of backing out of this?" And I said, "Well, I thought of nothing else but backing out, but I'm not going to." And so one other thing I remember about that time is my grandmother, who's now passed on, prayed with me and that I would meet the right people. And so once I got on that plane, I immediately began to meet the right people. The guy I was sitting next to on the plane got me a discount at the hotel in Puebla, and some people at the hotel in Puebla sent me, I told them what I was trying to do, and they sent me to a school where they knew people. And so the third school I went to hired me as a teacher with no experience as a teacher. What I had was a plain Midwest accent. I didn't talk like a New Englander or a Texan or a Southerner. Didn't have any of those heavy accents. So that's what they wanted, and that's what they got. It was really, as I say, by some measures, it was the best job I ever had in terms of income versus where I was. It was among the better paying jobs. Not the very top, but in Mexico for just somebody who didn't really have teaching experience. It was a really gift from God. So I did that for a while, and I really enjoyed it. But Spanish is, if you know anything about Spanish, the sentences are constructed a little bit differently, and there's some other differences. But one of the things that got me thinking about going back up to the States and trying journalism one last time was I was walking down the street to my favorite taco place that stayed open late, and I was thinking to myself in English, this was a day very hard. Now that sounds like nonsense. In English, we would say it's a very hard day, but in Spanish, that's the way the construction would be. So as soon as I thought that, I said, uh-oh, I better get back up to the States before I forget how to speak English. And so shortly after that, I did. But it was really foundational. It was really good for me in a lot of ways. The teaching that I did helped me in a lot of other situations, public speaking. I subsequently was a Sunday school teacher after that. So it was really fun. And I was immersed in language all day. If I wasn't helping people learn English, they were helping me learn Spanish. So it was a really fun time. And I think it's a little rougher down there now. I don't think I'd do that again, but really, really blessed to have that as an experience. People that look at my resume, they see Alaska on it and Mexico, and it's almost tiring just to read it. But that was my little Mexican interlude.
Yeah. So let's switch over now and talk about your blind recruiting days. Just kind of tell people about, recruiting the blind, because I know that you were very thorough and detailed when I used to work with you. So just, kind of discuss what you would tell a blind person that's trying to get a job or do stuff, and how the ways that you encourage people and told your story, because a lot of people liked you and you were real great at recruiting.
Well, thank you for that, first of all. And I was really just an advocate for the blind. And one of the things I told people was that as a blind person myself, I have no problem, diplomatically or if need be or not, telling a person that what they're saying is excuses. So in other words, I know full well the differences between the very real barriers that there are in the world for a blind job seeker, and I know they exist. I know where they are and how hard they are, but I also know an excuse when I hear it, and I heard some over the years. So that was a lot of my value as a recruiter, was that. But I tried to level with everybody. And if I didn't have the situation that was going to be best for them, I told them so. And I, I would always fight for to my own hurt. Sometimes would always fight for the advocate for the blind and their capabilities. And because a lot of times in my time, the jobs that you could get were mostly entry level jobs, and I always advocated for promotion for the qualified blind people. But it was really a very good extension of just my persona as an advocate for the blind and a realist, and just someone who, I mean, I know when I hit the job market, I just wanted to work and take care of myself, and that's all people really want is a chance. And I have failed at some things, and very few people have not failed somewhere along the line. But I just always wanted a chance to fail or succeed, and then people deserve that, and that's how I went to bat for people.
Oh, that's a great segue. Speaking of going to bat, let's talk about your blind beat baseball career. You were a player as well as a coach. Kind of explain to people what that is, and what beat baseball is, and some of the accomplishments that you achieved during your career.
Well, beat baseball is a form of baseball for the blind, and I never knew it existed until um, let's see, kind of late. I was in my 30s, early 30s, maybe. Growing up, I love baseball. I was in Ohio at the era of the Big Red Machine, and who wouldn't love baseball when your team, wins most of the time, World Series championships and pennants and just legendary baseball team. And I loved baseball. I still do, but I was all about it. And when I first heard there was a way that a blind person could play baseball, I mean, I was all in, absolutely all in. And so, in fact, the baseball and the journalism kind of crossed paths, because I had a little weekly job in Wichita, working for a weekly magazine, and my editor said, "Hey, there's a sport. It's called beep baseball. Go get me a story on beep baseball." So she put me in touch with the coach, and I went out and I did, ask my questions. I went to practice with a notebook, not with a bat, but and I mentioned to the coach that, hey, I'm visually impaired myself, by the way. And so toward the end of this practice, he says, why don't you step in there and take this bat, put on this blindfold, and just take a couple of swings, And he was kind of laughing out of the side of his mouth. And I figured out later that he wasn't laughing because he thought I was going to make a fool out of myself. He was laughing because he knew that once I hit the ball, made contact one time, that was it. I'd be hooked, and he'd have a player. So that was a lot of fun. And so that was, let's see, that was 89, I believe, right before I got that job in Alaska. So he didn't have me long because I moved out of state. But that's how that started. And so it wasn't until a few years later when I got back to Ohio, I was telling a friend of mine that, hey, when I was in Kansas, I played this sport called beep baseball. And he said, well, we got a team right here. So I wanted to do something athletically, and there was that beep baseball, and there was some roller hockey for sighted people because I had enough sight to do that. And you had to pay a little bit for the roller hockey, and the beep baseball didn't have any dues at that time, so I chose the beep baseball. And it's really been kind of like going to the school for the blind. It enabled me to see a lot of places. We went to Taiwan one year to play baseball, So I've, been over there in Taiwan. When you're on somebody else's soil and you hear your national anthem played, that's a life highlight. That's something I never will forget. Our team at that point was pretty mediocre, but that still was a real highlight. So I certainly remember that. I was a decent athlete, but the thing that made me a really good player was my mental preparation. And so not everybody is gifted with superb, supreme athleticism, but you can be on task and be dedicated and maximize what you have. So that's what happened for me. So I ended up playing 20 plus years, some years with the Columbus team, some years with a Kansas team. And then later on, toward the end of my career, I started a new team in Wichita, which lasted about 7 years. And so that's mostly where my coaching came in. And as a coach, I would go around the country, and I did a lot of media. I did some print, did some television and radio. And I would tell people that, when sighted people around the country see us playing baseball, they say, well, we didn't know blind people could play baseball. And I would always say, well, that's good. There are probably a lot of other things you didn't think a blind person could do in the work world. So then they were open to at least listening to that because they had seen this beep baseball. So, you could give a lot of speeches and, but what better calling card for the capabilities of the blind than baseball? Everybody knows something about baseball. So it was, so that was my attitude with it. It was fun and athletic, but I never would have put as much work into it as I did if I didn't recognize it as a place where blind people can learn to succeed in many ways. And I always told my players, if all you get out of this are wins and losses, I haven't done my job, because there's so much more that you can learn from this experience. And some players did and some didn't, but it was very rewarding for me, and something I obviously never forget.
Well, for those who might not know what beat baseball is, explain how it's played and how the game works.
So you have 6 players in the field instead of 9. You have some sighted players. First of all, the pitcher is sighted. We think that's a great idea to have the pitcher be sighted. So you have a pitcher and a catcher who are sighted, and you have 2 people on the defense who are sighted, and they're called spotters. A spotter is allowed to give a number corresponding to a zone as to where the ball is going. So everybody in this game, except the sighted players, all the blind players are blindfolded so that it's even, because I'm partially sighted. Some people obviously have less or no vision. So everybody puts on a blindfold, and that makes it even. So the pitcher is on the same team with the batter. So pitcher, catcher, and batter are a unit in beat baseball. So, and I liken it to in football, you have when you're kicking a field goal or an extra point, you have a center who snaps the ball. You have a holder who holds it, and a kicker, of course, who kicks it. So that's a unit, and they practice all year long. So the timing is just perfect. And that's the kind of unit you are as a batter, pitcher, catcher, batter in beat baseball. So your skill as a hitter is to swing at the same level every time. And once that pitcher gets to learn how high your swing is, it's his or her job to hit the bat with the ball. So that's the major difference between the two, between sighted baseball and baseball for the blind. There's no such thing as being on base in beat ball. You run 100 feet to the base, which is the base is a cone, actually, which makes a noise. So once at the point of contact, when you hit the ball, you run, they will turn on, a base operator will turn on either first base or third base, and you run to that base. If you get to the base before someone picks up the ball, then that's a run. And if they pick up the ball first, then that's an out. So that's how the game is played. We get 4 strikes instead of 3. You get 1. They call it a ball, but what it actually is I used to use it as just if I hit a ball and it went foul late, and I ran all the way to the base, or I was kind of out of breath, I would use that, what they call a ball, just to rest a little second. So you get a ball, and 4 strikes is an out. And you don't have sighted people probably think of blind people out there running around trying to pick up this ball, and you really don't have very many collisions in the field at all. Players get hurt because you fall over that cone, and you can't always determine how you're going to fall. But it's almost it's something to see. You really should, if you get a chance to see a game, it'd be worth your while. And there's some game action on YouTube that you can see, but it's really a test of a lot of things beyond your athletic ability, your leadership, your teamwork ability. But let's see, any other rules that are different. We have 6 innings instead of 9, and those are the major differences. So it's really a joy. And if you happen to stumble upon a game, you would definitely recognize it as very close to baseball or softball that most people have played at some point.
And to all the sighted people out there, if you would like to volunteer, just Google beat baseball, the closest to you, and maybe you can go help them out. They're always looking for volunteers on these teams.
That is accurate. It's hard to, because it's not. I used to call people lifers, and it really does take a lot. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of fundraising. Is trying to raise money to take these teams across the country. It takes a lot. So But then there are opportunities at all levels. I'm sure if you didn't have that level of time, that much time, your local team would still embrace you and let you volunteer. But it's really you learn a lot. It's going to be a good rewarding experience for you.
Well, let's switch over now and talk about Burton Media 7. Talk about that blog. Talk about how you created your company. Because I know in your one of your posts you talked about why you named it that. So tell the listeners why you named it that and what you write about and how often it comes out.
Well, the blog is called the Page Seven blog, and that has an athletic and a journalism meaning. Seven was my uniform number for most of my years as a beat baseball player. So, and then, I didn't want to set it up like I'm some big shot and my news or my articles are going to be on page one. So I assigned myself to page seven, and so that's how the name came. And I'm on WordPress, and you can find the blog at www.burtonmedia.org. It's an org, O-R-G. So Burton is B-U-R-T-O-N. So that's it, www.burtonmedia.org. And some of the things that I've talked about here tonight are some of the things, some of the memories and lessons that I talk about on the blog. So these days, usually on Tuesday, when I post on Tuesday, it's almost always about music. When I post on Sunday, quite often it's about some aspect of my Christian faith. And I also publish Friday and Saturday. So it's I just actually increased from 3 days to 4 days a week. It's Tuesday and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And right now, the blog it was started patterned after an old newspaper column so that it wouldn't have just one topic. I know a lot of blogs are very specific, and it may end up to where this blog spins off into, it could easily spin off into a sports, and then a one on faith, and then one on music. That could easily happen, but for right now, those are kind of the main topics, and it's Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So it's probably the pretty rare person who would be interested in every last post of mine, but you're definitely going to find something that will be of interest to you. I'm still trying to be an advocate for the blind, of course. I always will be that. And I'm trying to inform, and I'm trying to entertain, and hopefully I'm doing that. The world is full of bloggers. I'll tell you that right now. So it's hard to stand out. We live in an age of information glut. My words compete with a lot of other words. So it's really an honor to me if you take the time to get on the site and look around. But you'll be happy that you did. So what I tried to, so far I haven't really gotten into a lot of heavy controversies, because other people can do that much better. People have more resources to do things like that. I'm trying to keep it light. I'm not dodging. I mean, we've obviously got some tough things going on right now politically and medically with the virus, and I touch on those things, but it's mostly quite a lot lighter because I think that's what people are looking for is a break, a little happy break here and there from some of those other things. So one of the things that helped me as a writer is reading, and that should make sense to people, but not everybody knows that. So when I was a younger person on Talking Book, I used to listen to magazines like Newsweek and Sports Illustrated specifically. And they had the great writers who really knew how to tell a story. And I learned my craft a lot from them. And you can see that on my blog 4 days a week now. So it's a joy to to be able to share with people. I get some good comments, and I've finally I'm starting to get some followers up to 50 plus. I just passed the 50 mark last week sometime, and that doesn't sound like a lot, and it really isn't. But if you start a blog, you start with no followers, so you have to earn them one by one. Somebody's got to find you and like what you do, and so it's an honor when that happens. So um, that is how I'm trying to continue, and it's really something that's a challenge and something that's a real joy to me.
Well, I definitely hope this interview will get you more listeners. You want to flip over as the last topic and talk about your musician career? I know you do some karaoke, had been doing it, because of the pandemic, hadn't been doing it, but you like to play and you like to do things. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, and I have mentioned it a little bit on the blog, but just in the last few months, I've been a lot more faithful to the blog than I have my music. But I write, I play keyboard, and a little bit. I'm more of a singer than anything else. I'm probably, or people tell me anyway, an above average singer. And I write songs. I wrote a bunch of songs back in the old days, and I've written a few new ones. And I enjoy my main influence, I guess, was Jerry Rafferty, who's the late Scottish musician, and I love the Beatles, and so the piano-driven, Billy Joel, Elton John types, with harmony like the Hollies and the Beatles, and so that's the sound I'm going for, and it's really I like clever lyrics, and not, I try to turn a phrase just the way I do on the blog, try to do that musically. It's just the music has never taken off as well as the writing has. It's never too late, and I'm still working on it. But I love the music because once you write that song and you've got it written, nobody can ever take it away from you. It's something that you've created, and I don't know how to explain it. It's really a joy to have something that you can look at, and you've put that out into the world. And what I'd really like to do is to get it in a form where more people can see it and more people can listen to it and enjoy it. But it's just another form of expression, and something that I hope to continue.
Absolutely. Are there any other topics that we have not talked about that you would like to talk about? Any tips or life advice or writer's advice you'd like to give the listeners before we go?
Well, you've heard me talk about these various things, and some of them are, wow, a blind person can do that. And I'm not saying being reckless or anything like that, but challenge yourself. There are always going to be people who don't know you and don't know blindness, and they're going to stand in your way, and they're going to try to overprotect you or whatever. But stand up for yourself and just try things. If you're not going to succeed all the time, but believe in yourself as a blind person, and here and there along the way, if you can, help your fellow blind person to succeed. And I guess that's the message that I want to I've always tried all these years to put forward.
Absolutely. Go ahead and throw out your website again and any other contact information that you might want to give to the listeners to connect with you if they'd like to.
So I'm on WordPress. That's the site for my blog. It's the Page 7 blog. And if you remember how to spell my last name, Burton, Burton, you'll get there. So it's www.burtonmedia.org. It's an ORG. And if you sign up for the blog as a follower, you'll get a little mention on your, I think it's a email, right? Email notification
Yeah,
that,
and then it'll start getting emailed out every time you post.
yeah, so you'll get that on Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that's the way to get there. www.burtonmedia.org. And be delighted to have a lot of people show up there and look around.
And if you happen to forget it, I will put it in the show notes so you can also check there. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Burton. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed this.
Anytime, and listeners, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review after listening to Kevin Burton. For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.